Hi there. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast with Lisa Schlossberg. I'm your host, Lisa Schlossberg, a licensed social worker, certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. If you, like I have, struggle with your relationship with food, eating, and body image, I am here with this podcast to guide you into healing the relationship you have with yourself through a trauma-informed, holistic, and mind-body-soul approach. Together, we can support you in building a lifestyle of more peace, freedom, safety, and power. Hello again, and welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. This is me, your host, Lisa Schlossberg, and we are back for episode number 32 of the solo series today. Welcome back. Pleasure to have you. I am super excited to be here as usual, and don't tell on me, but this is the first time that I am actually skipping out on something else so that I could be here to do this. So I feel a little bit like that time that I skipped class. That's exactly how I feel, actually. Like the time I skipped class to study for another class. Like I'm skipping one work thing so that I could do this work thing, which I want to do way more. So anyway, that is how I find you today. I feel a little bit rebellious, but I think that these things are really important and I want to continue the conversation. So thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Okay, so first things first, the first update that we need to come back to is the Knicks won. The Knicks won the NBA championship for the first time since 1953. And no, it's not since 53. It is the first time in 53 years. I made that mistake already. The first time in 53 years that the Knicks have won the championship. So, congratulations to the Knicks. Congratulations to New York. New York City. It's like I can't make it up. The alignment of things, because like I said a couple episodes ago, I'm over here reflecting on the special, unique culture and energy of this city. And lo and behold, I mean, I've never seen anything like this or been a part of anything like this. So the Knicks game was on Saturday. I went out. It was just unbelievable. Like I said in the last episode, like check out, the videos you might be seeing on social media, but New York is thriving right now, and it's just really special to be here. And Neville has arrived. If you're watching on video and you are relatively new here, this guy right here, this is Neville. Those of you who are not watching on video, Neville is the black cat that is now sharing my chair with me. So the Knicks won, and we just had to acknowledge that. Now, my whole feed on all of my social media for like the entire week was either about High Rocks or the Knicks. And now I just saw this post and I just want to read it to you because there are 100,000 of them that I wanted to bring to the podcast, but we have other things to discuss. So I'm going to sum it up in this one. What I saw was, being a New Yorker is hard to explain if you're not one. This city will test you, humble you, break your heart, and somehow make you stronger every single time. That's why this Knicks run feels different. It's not just about basketball. It's about resilience. It's believing when no one else does. It's getting knocked down and showing up again anyway. The Knicks have always been the underdog, and so have a lot of New Yorkers. We know what it feels like to fight for every opportunity and every win. And it goes on and on. And again, I think there are so many of these that share this or a similar sentiment that have come up and just felt very aligned with this whole conversation. So I'm humoring myself, and thank you for humoring me with all of this. It was just a really sweet time to be reflecting on all of it. So that is update number one. Okay, next up, I would like to return or revisit our conversations with Bob, our Text from Bob series. It's been a couple weeks. So Bob and I have had, an ongoing conversation. So I want to share with you some of the takeaways that are coming from that and his experience, because again, he just has this really wise perspective sometimes. And I think there are just really good nuggets that I want to share with you. The first is just a little celebration. Let's shout out Bob. He said, 10 weeks into good breathing and the old programming is almost gone! ! So if you remember weeks and weeks ago when Bob texted me and said, how long do I have to do this before things are different? Like a couple days, right? And I suggested to him that, it took a couple decades to get here. It might take a little bit more than a couple days to get out. But the good news is that Bob is coming back and saying it's been 10 weeks into what he's calling good breathing, and the old programming is almost gone. So not all the time, not perfect, but 10 weeks. I mean, sometimes we could look at 10 weeks and be like, oh, that's more than 2 months. This will take forever. And 2 months is way better than, another couple decades. So I kind of just want to like give you hope and some inspiration, because Bob is out there killing it, and he doesn't have to be alone. He is not alone. Now, another thing that Bob said to me over the last couple of weeks that I thought, as soon as he said it, I was like, oh, this is such a good point. And I'm really glad. It's one of those things where I agree with it and I hear it immediately as truth, but I would never have thought of this myself. So I want to tell you what Bob said. He said, I'm realizing I only need to be in dad mode 10 to 20% of the time, especially as I get my habits under control and my routines routine. So that's important, because very often when we talk about reparenting and the introduction to reparenting and just connecting with the idea that you are a parent to yourself and your body and your inner child and all of those things, very often it can feel so daunting and overwhelming, because it feels like we have to be in parent mode or parenting 100% of the time. And so as soon as I saw this, I was like, yes, Bob, you are so right. And that is so important for people to know. It's not about having to parent all the time about every single thing. But in Bob's experience anyway, it's noticing that he's got to be in dad mode about 10 to 20% of the time. Okay? So I think that's just something I wanted to include in the conversation, because when you think about it that way, it can feel more doable, more accessible, more tolerable, and, a lot less out of reach, ultimately. But the other part of this that feels important is what he said, that is, especially as I get my habits under control and my routines routine. And so there really is something to be said for building habits and routine, in that they do become habitual and routine. And so some of the time when it comes to the reparenting around it and having to show up differently, do something new, get out of your comfort zone, if you do that for a period of time, at a certain point, those habits and routines just get locked in. Those are new neural pathways in your brain. This becomes the thing that you just do habitually. And then you don't have to parent around it so much. It's not, a fight. It's not a power struggle. It's not a game. You don't have to manipulate yourself. Or, it's like at a certain point, those things just become your groove. And then you don't have to work so hard at it. So not only is it not parenting all of the time, it's about 10 or 20%, or, whatever percentage maybe you find for you. But then once those things get locked in, then you don't have to parent so much around them. And I think that that's just important, for you to have realistic expectations of how it's not always going to be so hard. Okay. So those are my random follow-up thoughts. But now I want to give you my one follow-up thought on the last episode about when I'm talking about the phrase, it's not my problem, and how that shows up in other relationships, how it shows up in the relationship with ourselves and things like that. But as I'm hearing myself talk about, leaving a job or leaving a relationship and having that thought in the back of your head, what are they going to do? Or how could I do this to them? And then, my reminder to you is that's not your problem. That's their problem. And the whole point being, we have to understand that that's very loving. It's very loving and fiercely self-compassionate for you to take that stance for yourself. And we could also say it's very loving even toward other people, because you're no longer taking responsibility for them. You are empowering them. You are calling them forward, whether you know it or not, whether it feels like that or not. It's very loving. But when I was listening to it, I was also thinking about, and it's funny because I told you about the conversation I had with my client about potentially thinking about leaving her job. And then as we continued the conversation, we also started discussing it in this context, not just about other people, but also about ourselves. And what I mean by that is now instead of, it kind of builds on the same idea I was talking about last time where you want to, you want to tell the truth and draw awareness to things almost as if the emotional consequence is not your responsibility. So it allows you to show up honestly, but then you do have to take responsibility with the tender self-compassion to feel your feelings that show up. A little bit similar to that idea, but I just want to revisit what I said even, many episodes ago about leaving San Diego as an example, where sometimes when we're talking about intuitive guidance and direction, you will not know, as you heard me say, you will not always know why or where it's leading or why, what you're being set up for, almost like you don't always know. But so part of that is when you are clear about something you need. So for me, for example, when I knew the next right action was for me to come back to New York, then at that point, I had a lot of questions and a lot of curiosities, similar to if I were leaving a relationship, the way that I would consider, well, what are they going to do? I had a lot of those thoughts about myself. What am I going to do? I understand that I'm being kind of guided to go back to the East Coast, but what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? Am I going to live with someone? Like, do I get an apartment? Am I living in the city? Do I go live at home? Like, what do I do? And so the same way that I might respond to someone saying, how can you leave this job or how can you leave this person? What are they going to do? And I will say, that's not my problem. I had the same reaction towards myself. And I think this is what we also need to practice, is having that same reaction toward ourselves when I hear myself say, what am I going to do? In that moment, my answer is, that's not my problem. The problem of future Lisa, and not in an invalidating, neglectful way, because I'm fully aware that it is my responsibility to figure that out, right? I'm not offloading the responsibility. But in that moment, when I'm preoccupied with leave San Diego, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? It's like, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't need to know. What I know is that I need to take this next correct action that is so clear to me. And what comes next, I don't know. I don't know. It's not my problem. Future me is going to have to figure that out. And I'm going to have to take responsibility for that. But it's about being in relationship with, ultimately, I think, honoring what is true in the present moment without having the future figured out. And so I just think that as, again, we're having these conversations about boundaries and what is in whose lane and what is whose responsibility, sometimes it's not just about between you and other people. It's also you and yourself. And through the lens of like time and timeline. So future you, present you, past you, right? Sometimes, again, what future you is going to have to figure out is not present you's problem. And sometimes the reason, again, it's tricky to kind of articulate is because sometimes you could be doing that from a place of neglect. That's like, I don't know, not my problem, and I'm going to totally fuck you over in the process, and you're going to have to be the one to deal with that. You can do that in a way that is really unkind, but we're talking about doing it from a place that is very kind and loving, because what it basically says is, I know this is scary, I know we're sitting with a lot of uncertainty, and I'm still willing to honor the truth that is here now. What happens next is not my problem in this moment. The end. Okay, so having said all of that, now we're getting into, the next iteration of things. Let's come back to talking about intentional weight loss. Now, I'm kind of going to build on what came up a couple of episodes ago about this idea of what is judgment versus what is awareness. And what I talked about last time, when you have a hammer, everything's a nail. And when you have a fraught relationship with yourself, everything is an attack. So I bring that back because sometimes if you are becoming aware of things, it can feel like judgment, even though it isn't, right? And so if I'm asking questions, for example, like, what are you eating every day? Or how much are you eating? Or what did you eat today? Those are neutral and objective data collection questions, but it can feel like an attack. Okay, so that's why we have to talk about what is becoming aware and what is judging. So that's just kind of the reminder. We had that conversation. But now, what I want to talk a little bit more granularly about is how fat loss, because again, we're not losing weight, we're losing fat. If we're talking about fat loss, there are some things that have to happen. And get a little, again, more granular about what this means. So the easiest, most simplified way, and again, there are other factors for sure, but the simplest way to talk about it is there really is one thing that needs to happen for fat loss to occur, and that is a calorie deficit. So in order for that to happen, there are, there's sayings about there are many ways to skin a cat. And so it's not really about how to do it in terms of this is the approach. There are a few ways that you could do it. But the point is that there has to be a calorie deficit if fat loss is going to happen. And so, again, some people would prefer to increase their output, and so they're burning more calories. So that could be the intention. Some people would prefer to not include exercise at all and make changes to their diet. And some people will do a mix of both, because the options are really you're, pulling the levers of the input and the output. But either way, you really are operating with this math formula, if you will, the numbers game. That's what it comes down to. If you want fat loss, it requires a calorie deficit. So now, when we start, again, paying attention, and I have seen this happen with so many of my clients now, when we start paying attention to what we're eating and setting goals, setting intentions, it can be really challenging mentally, emotionally, to not conflate that with the stories many of us have around not being good enough or not doing enough or being too much or whatever those core fears, narratives, beliefs are, however you relate to them, whatever they are. But if you have that running in the background, it's almost like this is where they show up. So what I'm trying to say to you is there are certain things that you need to do to attain fat loss, but those are not things that you're doing to attain worthiness. And that's something you need to be really clear about. So here's an example that comes up a lot. If someone says, let's make it really easy. I ate too much. I ate too much yesterday. If that statement is perceived internally as, I ate too much to be lovable. I ate too much to deserve belonging. I ate so much that I am no longer worthy of connection. If that's what it means to you, if that's the meaning, again, your mind is a meaning-making machine. It happens by itself. You don't even know you're doing it, and it's not happening consciously or intentionally. But if that's what's happening on some level, that your behaviors, your choices, decisions, or experiences around food and eating hold that meaning, that's going to be your experience of it. Not because it's true, but because we see the world as we are. And we see our meaning of our eating habits as we are, not as it is. So one of the way I think about it is, this is what I would call the tool. I will label this the finish the sentence tool, the finish the sentence game. Okay. Meaning, I ate too much. Okay. Too much for what? Most of the time, if you're saying something like that, it might mean too much to feel comfortable in my body. Okay. So nothing about how lovable you are, nothing about how worthy or valuable you are, nothing about longing or belonging or connection, none of that stuff. Just, I ate too much to feel comfortable. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, sometimes that happens. Or sometimes, and this is where it starts to get a little tricky, is if someone says, I ate too much. Okay, too much for what? Finish the sentence. I ate too much to be in a calorie deficit. Okay. So you're no longer in a calorie deficit, which means it's not going to result in fat loss for, that day. But what does that mean about you? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about how lovable you are. It doesn't mean anything about how worthy of belonging and connection you are. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just means that you ate too much to be in a deficit. Now you're in a caloric surplus. Okay. You might feel uncomfortable about that. You might feel disappointed about that, or frustrated or upset about that. You might even feel like a failure because of that. I will talk about that later. But right now in this moment, okay, you see how this works is maybe you did eat too much to be comfortable physically in your body. Maybe you did eat too much to maintain a deficit, so you're not going to lose any fat. But this means nothing about you. So we have to, again, be able to be aware I did not eat enough, or I ate too much to be in a deficit. We have to know that that is awareness. That is not judgment. That is not making meaning. And it means, again, nothing about you. But if we're going to talk about how to lose fat, how to create a deficit, you have to know this is not about you, because you are going to necessarily have to engage in conversations like this with yourself. You are going to have to pay attention to what you're eating, when you're eating, how much you're eating, things like that. So you've got to be really clear. This is not about how lovable you are. This is not about how worthy you are. This is about the math equation that you have to participate in if this is what you want. And then this also happens, by the way, with even just what I'll call, like, for lack of better, I feel like no word is, every word has a connotation now, but for lack of better word, like healthy behaviors and healthy foods. So, and this happens so often now when I work with people around this one-on-one. If someone says, I didn't eat enough vegetables, or they say, a dietitian told me that I'm not eating enough vegetables, something like that. Again, first, it can be perceived as an attack. It can feel perceived as an insult. It can feel like we're being told, we're doing something bad. It can feel like we are being shamed and judged. When the truth is, if someone says, you didn't eat enough vegetables today. Okay, finish the sentence. For what? I didn't eat enough vegetables for what? To be lovable? No. You're lovable no matter how many vegetables you eat. Okay, so for what? I didn't eat enough vegetables. To hit the daily recommended amount. Okay, that's it. That's all. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything, but that's the point, is we make all this meaning of things when we get any sort of feedback or guidance around, quote unquote, how to eat. It can feel as though, because we're projecting all this stuff onto it, that these are things we need to do in order to be good enough, or to be safe enough, or to be lovable, or to be safe, ultimately, is what it comes down to. When the truth is, we have to wake up to that, because that's not what's happening. That's not the conversation we're having. What we're talking about is you aligning with yourself and moving toward a goal that you have. So all of this to say, this is why for me, it is so important to be clear and conscious of your intentions behind your behaviors. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you choosing what you're choosing? Why is this your decision? You want to be clear with yourself. Again, like finish the sentence with yourself. Why are you doing this? Why are you eating this way? Why are you choosing to practice not eating that thing? Why? For what? Because if you are, especially in moments of discomfort, where let's say you are choosing to say no to something, if you're telling yourself and you are believing, consciously or not, that you have to say no to this thing, this dessert, for example, so that you can be lovable, or you're saying no to this dessert so you can lose weight so that you can be lovable, you want to be really aware of that, because none of that is true. It's not because it's bad. It's not, and by the way, none of this is your fault, right? All of this is the conditioning that we have. This is the opportunity to heal it. But it's not about it being bad. It's just about the fact that it's not true. You don't have to say yes or no to anything in order to be worthy of love. So you don't want to buy into that belief because you're just living in, it's just false. So it's not in alignment with love. It's not in alignment with truth. Because you are unconditionally lovable and worthy. And that is just, again, the foundation. Even if you don't believe it, even if you don't feel it, this is where you act as if, and you just try it on. But if you're sitting in front of that same dessert that you want to say no to, and you are clear with yourself, no, I'm lovable, I'm worthy. It's just I'm saying no to this so I can maintain a calorie deficit because my goal is fat loss. That's a completely different situation. That's a completely different meaning. It's a completely different energy, and you'll probably experience it completely differently for that reason. So the invitation here is to, again, finish the sentence. Like, why do you have to do this? What's it for? Because very often, if you remind yourself, oh yeah, I don't need to do this for any other reason than this is what it requires to get to my goal. This is one of those things that I have to do because it's a numbers game that I have to play. Then fine. Then it's like, okay, then you can kind of hold it gently. But if you are making meaning of it, and again, it's about your identity and it feels like a lack of safety, you can't hold that gently. And this is where I also think about, I just keep coming back to this, but like an athlete who is training and getting uncomfortable and challenging themselves, right? It's like in the moment, they're not doing it because this is what they do or this is what they have to do in order to be lovable. It's because they perform. It's because they have a competition coming up. It's because they have a meet or a game or it's for something. There's a reason to get uncomfortable. There's a reason to practice saying no to myself. There's a reason to set boundaries with myself. And it's not about achieving safety. It's about achieving wellness. It's about achieving what I want. It's about aligning with myself. And so, again, just coming back to having clear intentions about why you're choosing what you're choosing, even if in the moment you don't really feel like choosing it, can you remember that this is being driven by you for no other reason than you're moving in the direction you want to take yourself in? It's not because you need love. It's not because you need safety. It's not because you need worthiness. It's because you desire fat loss, period. So the last thing I wrote in my notes about this is very straight up. Again, I don't know what it is. It's like I cannot move on until I read this last, piece, as always. All the things about taking it personally and remembering this is about math and removing yourself and your narrative. So that's the thing. And the rest of this episode is going to talk a little bit more about, how to do it. But the idea is you want to remember consciously, cognitively, that, again, this is numbers, this is math, this is just what has to happen in order to get to a certain place. Kind of like, I think it was a client of mine who once made this connection or drew a parallel between kind of preparing to go on a trip. And how sometimes you just have to get your things together. And I think about it in that sense a little bit, where it's like, Why are you packing a bag? Why are you, waking up early? Why are you going out of your way to make plans? Why are you making yourself uncomfortable, and why are you inconveniencing yourself? Well, because I'm preparing for a trip. These are just some of the things I have to do to make that happen. This is no different. You're preparing for fat loss. These are just the things you have to do. Yeah, you have to be in a deficit. It's not about you. Okay? So anytime you need the reminder consciously, it is not about you. It's about the numbers. That's where now we have an opportunity to, as I said a couple episodes ago, really heal the energy of it. So we talked about it's not just about balancing masculine and feminine energy. It is about getting the masculine out of its shadow. Okay, well, how do we engage with the masculine energy in a healthy, balanced, aligned way? Well, what I kept saying is we have to heal the energy around it. We have to heal the energy around it. We have to heal from the trauma of the shadow masculine. So how do we do that? That's what we're going to talk about now. So I'm going to give you a few examples, but the headline here is that this is where it's really about how to meet fear with love. That's what this is all going to be about. So when you start to set the intention to move towards something like fat loss, like I was just saying, I do think it is very important to have a clear understanding with yourself about what your intentions are. Because, so like I, have kind of been threading into this conversation over the last couple of episodes, sometimes when you start to pay attention or you set the intention to change a behavior, especially around food or eating or exercise, it can feel as though it's the drill sergeant coming back. It's like that really mean, aggressive, punitive, punishing drill sergeant kind of energy. And so what I mean when I say be clear about your intentions is because sometimes all you need is the conscious reminder that is, oh, wait, like I was just saying, like, oh, wait, this isn't about me. This isn't about how lovable I am. This is about just the numbers game that I need to play. And sometimes just the reminder in the moment is enough to like shake it off and be like, oh, right. Okay, I started making this about me, and then I remembered it's not about me. I had a moment of forgetting. Now I'm having a moment of remembering. And to give you an example of this, I had a client call recently where we were working on just general kind of anxiety stuff. And my client came in and was very excited to report that she experienced something that in the past would have created a lot of anxiety for her. And she noticed in the moment that she was able to kind of just wake up to it and remind herself that nothing life-threatening is happening here. This is not a predator. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not unsafe. Okay, this is really normal to be anxious about this. And then she took some deep breaths and she said, there was like a little bit of anxiety, but it was nothing compared to what it used to be. And so sometimes that's just an example of how sometimes it's like you just need to remember in the moment. And I've had so many of these experiences. I remember back when I was like really, again, trying to like heal through a lot of this stuff. And I would have moments where, for example, I would be sitting in front of a salad or something like that. And after my weight loss, there was a lot of trepidation and fear around like a salad because I felt like I was eating a quote unquote diet food and that I like had to eat more than that, or that it wasn't okay for me to be eating a salad because that meant that I had an eating disorder still, and like all this judgment around it. And I would have a moment where I'm sitting in front of this salad, like scared and judgmental of myself and second guessing myself and confused. Am I doing the right thing? Is this okay? And then I would have a moment of, again, literally just waking up and remembering and being like, oh, wait, yes, okay. I am safe. This is okay. And just like, and so what I'm saying to you is when you are clear on your intentions, why you're doing what you're doing, who it's for, what it's for, where is this taking you? Sometimes all you have to do is remember it. And the reason that I am having this conversation with you today is because sometimes it is not that easy. Because sometimes what happens is, so let's use the example of I'm uncomfortable, I'm not unsafe. You have heard me say this many times, very likely. And often, that's really helpful to remember, because your body might be reacting to something as though you are unsafe, as though it is life-threatening, as though it is a predator. And as soon as you realize, oh, wait, I'm not going to die here. I can relax. Cool. But then sometimes that's not accessible. And how that conversation sounds is, I know that I'm safe, but I don't feel like I am. And we need to have acceptance that sometimes that's part of the process. Sometimes that's how it's going to go. Sometimes you can look around the room and use all your tools and all your skills and feel your feet on the ground and notice the room around you and come to your senses. You can use every tool in the toolbox. And at the end of the day, you might find yourself having a moment where you say, I know that I'm not unsafe, but I still feel like I am. And so I think that this is really important to talk about, because sometimes, especially in this kind of work, I've heard this narrative around kind of like, oh, it's just fear. It's just fear. Don't give into it. Don't let it, we don't want to give our power away, and we don't want fear to drive the bus. And all of that is really valid. But I've also seen it become very invalidating, where sometimes, again, if you're having the experience that is, I feel like I'm going to die, it's not that helpful to hear, well, you're not. Sometimes it's about being willing to sit with yourself in, I know you feel this. I know you feel that way. And it's okay. You don't have to feel safe just because I'm telling you that you are. You don't have to feel comfortable just because you know you're not going to die. Sometimes that's not going to happen. And what I want you to know is that that's okay and it's appropriate. And it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's just sometimes how it goes. So what do you do? What do you do in that moment? You're uncomfortable, you're anxious, it feels unsafe, even though you're looking around the room knowing that there's no life-threatening predator. What do? Well, if you are having that moment where part of you, your inner child, your body is saying, but I feel unsafe, but I feel so scared, but I do feel like I'm going to die. Even if I recognize that I fully am not going to die here because of this feeling, but I feel like I am, that is your opportunity to, again, meet fear with love. I see you. I hear you. And my favorite these days, I know. I know you feel so unsafe. I know it feels to you like you're going to die. I know. It's okay. It's okay. And that's where you surrender to it. You stop trying to use every tool in the toolbox. You stop trying to get out of it. You stop trying to fix it or solve it or save yourself from it. You just surrender to the moment of fear. And you meet your fear with love. You meet your feeling unsafe with acceptance. Right now in this moment, I know I'm not going to die, but I feel like I am. Right now in this moment, I feel unsafe, even though I know I'm not. Okay. Transformation begins with the radical acceptance of what is. Right now in this moment, what is that I know this isn't life-threatening, but I feel like it is. Can I let that be okay? So, just to add on that for a moment, I really do think a couple things. I'm going to be so straight up with you. Number one, what matters about this is when you're in that moment, you're not just kind of telling yourself these things, but you are willing to experience it energetically, emotionally, in your body. And so I do think that that needs to be said, because this isn't the kind of thing you can talk your way out of. This is like, we need the energy of fear metabolized. And the other thing I want to say about it is that I do think some of the time we need support. We need support with that. I think some of the time, especially when the overwhelm or the sensation or the fear is so big and powerful, it won't happen when we're all by ourselves. And that's really appropriate. And so I just want to kind of put those little pointers in here with that. And maybe even like a plug for one-on-one coaching or therapy. Again, not with me, sure, but with anyone else that can hold this kind of space with you and for you. If you find that you're somewhat limited in accessing it with like a journal, though I will tell you a few different examples of when it is accessible sometimes. But the point that I also want to make is that, again, in this work, I have heard and seen many times the invalidation of fear with reasoning or logic. And so you probably, again, know I love the mantra, I'm uncomfortable, not unsafe, because then at least we can let ourselves feel what we're feeling without contracting and resisting and trying to, get out of it. But at the same time, I'm uncomfortable, not unsafe, can become something that we use to invalidate our experience. So just, again, pay attention to that, because you don't always have to be in life-threatening danger to feel like you're in life-threatening danger. And you don't have to be in actual life-threatening danger to validate the emotional experience of feeling like you're in life-threatening danger. Listen to that again. So, how this shows up very often when it comes to food and eating and healing your relationship with all of this as you are intentionally pursuing something like weight loss or fat loss is that you might be very clear on your intentions, that this is about taking responsibility, this is about taking ownership and being empowered, and it's ultimately very loving even though it's uncomfortable. You might be very clear about why you're doing what you're doing. And you might even feel really good about why you're doing what you're doing. And still, you can say to yourself, I am not being the drill sergeant. I am not coming at you with an attack. This is not an insult. I'm not judging you and I'm not shaming you. You can say all of those things to yourself, and you might still notice the part of you that says, yeah, but I feel like you are. And instead, here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. What usually happens is if we hear something like that, the response very often is, well, I'm not. I'm not being a drill sergeant. And then we get activated and we get pissed off or upset or scared. We get scared that it's not working. And then it becomes kind of this power struggle. I'm not being a drill sergeant. I swear. I mean, literally, I'm just asking you these questions so that I can collect some data. And then it's like, no. Okay? No. That's what you don't want to do. What you want to do is say, I am not coming at you with an attack. I am not insulting, judging, or shaming you. I'm just trying to work together. And if the part of you that has been so traumatized by diet culture says, yeah, but I still feel like you're judging me, I still feel like you're shaming me, that's where you say, okay, I hear you. That's really valid that you feel that way. And being able to hold both at the same time, I'm going to give you another example of this. But holding both at the same time, that is, an awareness that you are not shaming yourself and the fact that you feel ashamed together at the same time. That's your job. So when there's a part that says, but I still feel like you're a drill sergeant. This still reminds me of diet culture. This is so reminiscent of that personal trainer I had once. Your job is to say, I know it is. And they really can sound similar sometimes. They can even look really similar sometimes. So I understand why it feels that way to you. And that's okay. That's okay. And that's the tender self-compassion coming in, where you're not trying to change how you feel. You're not trying to get it to believe you. You can't persuade someone into feeling safe with you. You can't persuade someone or convince someone that you are trustworthy. You just have to be those things. And that's what this is about when there is a part that says, or you might even hear, I love, for what it's worth, when an inner child comes in and says, I don't believe you. You might say, I'm not shaming you. I'm not doing this to hurt your feelings. And they might say, I don't believe you. That's all you've ever done. And the really cool thing about it, the reason I love it, is because it's so humbling. Because that's the moment where you say, okay. Because you can't force them to believe you. No one can force you to believe anything. You believe things because you experience them. Your brain learns through experience. So if you want your inner child to know that you're not judging and shaming them, the only way to do it is to show up with that energy. Don't judge them and don't shame them, but you can't control whether they feel judged or shamed. Only you can control if you are judging or shaming them. And again, I think that these are really, they're simple, but they're very complex at the same time. But this is why I talk about when Brene Brown uses the example. If you are being held accountable and you feel shame, that's not the same thing as you being shamed. If you are drawing the awareness to what you eat and you feel shame, that's not the same thing as you shaming yourself. But it might feel that way. It might feel like you are because you have a lot of history of doing that. And that's valid. So when you're in that moment, if you're in that moment and this resonates, that's where you want to, again, think about meet your fear with love. And what I mean by that is really just create space for it. I see that you're scared. I hear that you're scared. It's okay that you're scared. Your fear doesn't scare me. And that is how you heal the energy around it so that you can eventually start asking those questions and gathering that data without it being so triggering. It's very much like a million years ago when I talked on, I think it was the first intentional weight loss episodes, about triggers. Triggers, your trigger is your responsibility. And my belief around triggers is it's really not that helpful, and you will not access a life of peace and freedom by avoiding triggers. But actually, if you learn how to tolerate them and move through them and return yourself to regulation and safety, that's where peace and freedom lie. And so this is no different. It's like, okay, bringing awareness to what you're eating triggers you. Good. Be triggered by it and then sit with the fear and be with yourself in it. Use it as an opportunity to express tender self-compassion to yourself, accepting ourselves to alleviate suffering. That's where you do that, when you're scared. And that's it. So if this, again, if it's triggering, it should be. But if you do this enough times where it's like, I feel like I'm being attacked. I feel like I'm being judged. I know that I'm not, but oh God, this brings up so much old stuff. And you are there now as the adult to say, I know. I remember all of that and how painful that was and how much that hurt and how much shame I carry from all of that. That's not what I'm doing here, but I recognize that that's what it reminds me of. That's the energy that is coming up to be healed through me, through this process. Then you really can go where you want to go, and you can do things like intentional weight loss in a way that doesn't feel so activating and triggering. But I don't think there's any way to get there without going through it. The only way out is through. And for what it's worth, your relationship with food and eating in your body, I know you've heard me say this, are not going anywhere. So I think going through it sooner than later, if this is something that calls to you, is worth it. So I already told you, this was a huge breakthrough for a client of mine where we had a one-on-one session where, she was doing that thing of just kind of like beating herself up with the message of you're uncomfortable, not unsafe. You're uncomfortable, not unsafe. You're not unsafe. You're not unsafe. And then, through coaching, I was able to facilitate the experience for her to practice. I know that I'm safe, but I feel like I'm not. and to just bring loving acceptance to that fear and the feeling of not being safe. And then I had another client, and I thought this was so powerful that I want to tell you about it because it's the same idea. What was happening was we were going through a conversation, and what she was noticing is that she was making a decision to change a behavior that was aligned with her and her values and her goals and intentions. And when she was sitting with it, it felt to her, or her inner child came up and said, I feel like I'm being abandoned. It feels like you're abandoning me. And when I had this client check in with herself, I just said something very simply, plainly along the lines of, do you think that's what you're doing? Is that what you're doing? Are you abandoning her? And she said, no, I'm just doing what's best for me in this season of my life. But she still feels abandoned. And it was a really powerful moment because I was able to sit with her in exactly that moment of, I know that I'm not abandoning you, and I still can't get you to feel like you're not being abandoned. And it's our job, I think, to again hold both at the same time. I know I'm safe, but I don't feel like I am. I know I'm not being abandoned, but I feel like I am. I know that it's not life-threatening, but I feel like it is. We need to let that be okay. And it's very tricky and challenging because, again, when you're the inner parent and the inner child and you're doing both of this at the same time, it can feel very often, right? Like if my inner child feels like I'm abandoning her, then something's wrong. Then I shouldn't be doing it. And it's like, no, actually, sometimes it's kind of like, if a baby feels like it's being abandoned because mom has to go to work. Mom knows she's not abandoning her child. She's not, she's not a neglectful parent. She just has to go to work. But you can't make the 2-year-old understand that. You can't make the baby understand that. They might still feel abandoned. I feel this every single time I walk out the door, and Neville thinks that I will never be home again. But it's like, there's nothing I can do to get him to understand that I'm just going out for a couple hours and I'll be back. But I have like that, but it's the same idea. Okay. And so I think it's important that as, again, we progress through this, that if your inner child is saying, I feel like you're abandoning me, your response to that is, I know. I hear you. I know that that's what it feels like, and it is okay that it feels that way. That's it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to solve it. You don't have to get out of it. You don't have to change anything about it. You just meet it with love and acceptance. And for what it's worth, this also reminds me very much of when I broke up with my ex-boyfriend years ago, and it was excruciating. I honestly don't remember if I've talked about this here or not, but what I do remember and what all of this is reminding me of is when I was in Italy, because I escaped to Italy again after that breakup, and when I was there in Florence, I remember feeling like I had never cried so hard in my life. I actually still to this day feel like maybe that was true. But in that moment, what I remember was my inner child. It felt like me and my ex were like parents that got divorced. And it was one of those times where, again, me as the adult, I knew that this was an aligned decision. I knew that this is what had to happen. I knew that that was correct. But my inner child did not. And my inner child was coming at me like I just ruined her whole life. And that's also where I heard her say to me, I hate you. I hate you. And listen, I don't have kids. I don't have actual outer children. But I imagine what it feels like when your child says, I hate you. Because in that moment, that's what it felt like. Now, here's why I'm telling you this. In that moment, I knew how to do what I'm teaching you to do here. I knew how to look at my devastated, heartbroken, making a mess, throwing a temper tantrum inner child saying, I hate you, and turn toward her and say, I know. I know you do. I know. And I knew in that moment there was nothing I could do. There was nothing I could say. I wasn't in my hands. I was powerless. She was going to be in that place of throwing a temper tantrum, hating me. And I just had to let that happen. And I met my fear with love. I just let her be there. And I let me hold that space with it. So all of this to say, if you're having moments along the way where it feels like, it feels like you're the drill sergeant, it feels like you're shaming me, it feels like you're being mean, it feels like this, you can just say, I know it does. I know it feels that way. And it's okay. It's okay. And we're just going to keep practicing showing up to this. But these are the moments where, again, it's not just about saying the quote unquote right thing. It's about allowing yourself to embody your body as the fear is moving through it. That's the best way to say it. It's not about what you're saying to yourself. It's about being willing to experience the fear and actually feel it so that you can, again, kind of express and release it and then get back to it. Get back to your intentions. Now, the last couple of things that I will share with you about this today. I just had another client call actually during this last week where we were talking all about this, and another example showed up, and she said it was so great because I'm not bragging when I say this, but when I meet with some of my alumni, I'm just like, you know what? They're just so integrated in how they're out there living this and practicing this, that she was the one that said to me, she had a moment of, in her words, I know that I'm enough, but right now I feel like I'm not. And I want you to just sit with that for a second. I know that I'm enough, but right now I feel like I'm not. And it's the same exact thing. Same exact thing. I know that I'm not going to die, but I feel like I am. I know this, but I feel like this. Okay? I know that I'm enough, but I feel like I'm not. And I just think that that is so powerful. And again, it's so loving because you're either feeling that way and acknowledging it and accepting it, or you're feeling that way and you're denying it and avoiding it and pretending you're not. And so it is so loving to let yourself have it. Because, yeah, ideally, in a perfect world, if I had my magic wand, I would wave it and none of us would ever feel inadequate again. And the story of not good enough would never, ever show up. But the truth is, we don't really have that option. And so the next best thing is to allow ourselves moments to say, I know that I'm enough, but right now I feel like I'm not. And then the question, again, is what does that feel like? What emotions come up for you? Where do you feel those in your body? And can you breathe into it and let that sensation be here with you? Can you let that feeling be here with you? That's the invitation. Meet fear with love. Okay, now the last thing or last example or piece that I'm going to add to this today, and then we will continue next time, is, okay, well, all right. As I have shared here before, there has been a lot, very, very much coming up for me personally as I make my way through this intentional weight loss, and all sorts of things coming through, especially after I just did the High Rocks race a couple weeks ago, all about my body and my childhood in my body. So I've been, for what it's worth, practicing everything I preach. And a lot of that is going to live in the Patreon, and that is what the Patreon is for. So if you want to follow along that solo series, come on the Patreon and join me there. But without getting too into the details, this is an experience I had recently that I just wanted to, again, share with you to give you an example. Because I think as we start to do things like pay attention, be intentional around food and eating, or pursue intentional weight loss, a lot of people are struggling with the internalized anti-diet messaging around, love and accept yourself as you are, and taking that to mean, being a little too tender, and that turning into self-neglect, and you shouldn't want to change your body, and you shouldn't care what you look like, and if you do, you're a bad person, and a bad feminist, and a bad this, and like all that stuff. So we need to be aware of that too, if that is part of your experience the way that it is mine. And okay, so what I want to tell you is, I had a memory recently pop into my head because, okay, let me back up. I did this High Rocks race. If you don't know what High Rocks is, look it up, but it's a fitness competition, basically. I got a ticket 1 week out, and I did this with no training. So it was physically demanding, mentally demanding, and extraordinarily triggering in ways that I had no idea were going to show up. And so I'm kind of setting the stage and the context there because it has invited me to reconnect with all sorts of things around athletics and performance and running and gym and what it was like to be a kid in my body specifically, and things that I literally forgot about for years, or haven't thought about, or just didn't know I needed to go back to. And one of those, so that's the context. But what I want to tell you about is I had this memory pop into my head when I was lying in bed crying about things last week or so. And what I remembered was basically it was in elementary school. So, maybe I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old or something, already overweight at this point. And when we went out we didn't have to run the mile this time, but they set up, I think it was like 2 classes at a time, and we just had to run from one cone to another cone. And I think what they were doing was just timing our sprints. And it was 2 kids running at a time. And when gym teachers told us to go, I started running, and the boy that was running next to me ran backwards. And I don't know anything else about the story. I don't know what his intention was. My assumption is that it was to kind of make fun of how big and slow I was. And at the time, all I knew how to do, because this was the way that I dealt with everything, was deny it and pretend I didn't care. So not just deny that it happened. I couldn't deny that it happened. There were eyewitnesses. But deny that I cared at all about it, because that's how I managed and coped and survived. And again, I buried that a long time ago. And last week when it came up, I now had the capacity to sit with myself and tell the truth. That felt so embarrassing. And I felt so ashamed. And the reason that I'm telling you this right now is because what I noticed come up real hot and heavy in that moment was, no. You shouldn't feel ashamed. You shouldn't feel embarrassed. Like that anti-diet culture narrative. No. You should. Don't feel that. And so much of what I have been doing personally, internally, is having to use my fierce self-compassion to turn toward that part and say, no, no. I need to feel the truth of what this felt like. The truth is, I feel embarrassed. The truth is, I feel ashamed. And this is where it's like, I know that I'm enough, but sometimes I feel like I'm not. And we need to let that be okay. And that's the practice. And that's where I have been at, revisiting some of these old things and having to, again, very intentionally say, I know. It was embarrassing. I did feel embarrassed. I did feel a lot of shame. I did feel judged. I did. And it's okay. And I can just let that be here. I can just be here with that. And I can meet that with a lot of love. And so when I say, it's not just about what you're saying to yourself, it's about actually feeling through it. The reason I talked on Instagram the other day about how I feel like I've been literally time traveling is because when I'm in bed now, today, at 33 years old, crying about it, I can feel in my body the embarrassment as though I'm 8 years old again. And I now, instead of having to brush it off or eat about it or deny it or pretend, I can just sit with it and I can hold myself in tears and say, that was really embarrassing. And that hurt. And I know. And it's okay. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to solve it. I don't need to save myself from it. I can just feel it. And so it's the same skill. It's the same practice over and over again. And I will come back and say more about this and add on a little bit more in the next episode. But that's what I want to leave you with is, yes, be clear on your intentions. Yes, be clear that you're doing something very loving. Yes, be clear that you are just aligning your behaviors with your values and your intentions. Be clear on all of that consciously. And then know that when all of that doesn't, quote unquote, work, or there are parts of you that are still not bought in or still don't believe you, that's okay. That's where you turn toward them and you just say, I know this is really scary. It's okay that you're scared. It's okay that you're scared. And it's very much like the example I gave you episodes ago about taking the child to the doctor. It doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you validate the fear at the same time. What did you eat today? Oh, I feel like you're attacking me. It's not an attack, right? It's not an attack. And it's really valid that it feels like it is. Yeah, okay. So we're going to feel that. We're going to be with that. And we're also going to keep gently, with tenderness, love, respect, patience. We're going to keep drawing the awareness to what we're eating. We're just going to keep practicing the fierceness and the tenderness and the tender fierceness. So that's it. That's what I have for you today. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Okay, so like I said, much more of this on Patreon if you are interested in hearing more about it. And the third Thursday, this is just a reminder, the third Thursday of every month is a live Patreon call. So if you want to come join us live for a discussion, Q&A, be a part of it, please come join us. Check out the show notes for that. And as always, please rate, review, subscribe, and share this pod with the people in your life. And I will see you next week. I love you so much. Mwah.